All right, everyone, welcome to Talking the Walk, insights into how we think about walking. I think one of the discussion points or kind of attitudes, I guess, that has come out over the last couple of days is the idea that people don't think about walking. Only the people here think about walking quite much as more than anyone else in the world. And while that's amazing, I think that the speakers today kind of challenge that in really interesting ways. And they're going to be they look at all these different aspects of how normal people who are, obsessed with this stuff think about walking, think about what it means to be a pedestrian, think about what it means to care about a particular place and its walkability from all these different really interesting kinds of perspectives and places. We're going to kick off. We've got 6 speakers doing 5 papers. We've got one kind of co-presenter situation. They've got 12 minutes each, and I'm going to give them little waves. And after 12 minutes, by Mario, you can start throwing things at them. So that we really do make sure we have a good bit of time at the end for chats. Okay, I'm going to bring up our first person, who is Aaron Copeland. With Playful City, he's got 20 years of arts and arts and community advocacy with multiple different collectives and organisations, including Peak Arts, Upstart, Palm Tree, and a place Playful City. He's going to talk about laneways and if you agree with the okay, thanks.
Hey everyone. Do throw something if I am going over.
I'll give you away the tempo.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm Aaron, so excuse the notes. I'm tired. But I'm from a Playful City, where a not-for-profit who was established to address and highlight the issue that was becoming increasingly prevalent in towns and cities everywhere, that children and young people are being designed out by default of our city centres, including their families as well, in relation to how we use public space. So the negative impact, the physical, the psychological, the mental health implications of children not being able to access public space easily is well documented. And where children used to roam, where children could incidentally go outside their front door to play, that in many areas is gone in Dublin, across the different towns and cities where we are. All in the name, of course, of so-called better, faster, more hazardous modes of transport. So in the Playful City, where our aim is to bring communities together around the theme of play and openness to consulting with young people in terms of the decisions that affect their lives. So we're trying to create processes and different elements around the city that are designed to be equitable, inclusive, and accessible. So we are we run a number of different things, whether it's point on this, but the graffiti thing was part of a year-long consultation workshop with young people after COVID restrictions, and looking at how we could celebrate the voices of teenagers and their experiences, and start to claim back certain parts of the local area around North Dublin. And we also co-designed furniture around, put it around the city with young people as well. This is designed by a 14-year-old xylophone bag, and that is used to hack the Jersey barriers so that you can just slot it on to those cement barriers around the city. And we also designed curriculum so that young people can take over spaces and utilise spaces that might not often be used. So canals can become playgrounds. They already are in Dublin. You just have to walk around Dublin in summer and see all the young people using the water really playfully. And then we also facilitate communities and children to engage with their streets in a playful way. So that's kind of the goals that we try to, or if you like, kind of a central tenet is that everyone of all ages has can and should be involved in their local spaces and how they design. So today I'm going to talk to you about Love Our Laneways, which is a project in Sallynoggin, which is in the south of Dublin. It was a project that was initiated by Dunleary County Council, and the project aims to be an exemplar of how laneways and communities, or community spaces can be reimagined by working with local community. And to avoid, real aim is to avoid the common occurrence where the project, I have a man here who's going to nod at me, and he's going to be my support. So the common occurrence where you have a project being opposed before it even begins. So this was a kind of an effort to kind of work around that. So I'd like to just kind of go through some of the elements. This is a little map of the area of Sallynagan itself. It's an old enough estate. It's approximately 70 years old. But we're working on this area, about a 400-metre long stretch called the Gaps locally. It's a series of laneways that are thought of as one, but technically it's a series since the Gap. And it's an unusual laneway in that it doesn't just run along the backs of houses or the sides of houses, it runs along the frontage homes. So in that sense, approaching residents on this project is about reimagining space and really taking into account that this is a very delicate process. And that is really what's informed our approach to every single aspect of our communication with the residents in the area. We looked at it from a number of phases. We started on phase one only to realise we need to go back even further to phase zero, which I guess is phase one. But we realised on the end that we can't talk to communities first that are going to be directly affected by this, until we have a very clear-cut idea as to who the stakeholders are, who's involved in the general, in terms of the map of those that are involved in terms of the different levels of who we need to engage with. It was also important that we engaged with the local councillors from the very start. The main reason for that is that if a resident was to be informed about this and go to their councillor, the councillor not to know anything about it, be put on the back foot, and then all of a sudden you have an issue where the people are losing face and people are not sure as to what's happening. And that's really why we really wanted to get everything in order before we went on. And it was important that DLR, the council, were given opportunities to meet interdepartmentally. So we hosted a number of workshops with departments in the council so that everybody understood, and we understood when we were going out to speak to the local residents, just what the parameters were according to the council and according to each department. So whether it was waste, whether it was maybe looking after lampposts, whatever, that it was all those issues. One of the lovely things about it was that there's 2 colleges in the area, and so we were able to work with a number of students, and that was fun. And so we were able to work with the BA in Visual Communications to establish a brand or a visual image or visual communication. I don't know the technical term. Yeah, but we were able to just establish those partnerships centered locally, and then go out to the wider community. It was really important that we weren't simply going to the community asking them what they would like on behalf of Dún Laoghaire, or it was very important that we didn't have a set of predetermined designs that we were putting to them, asking them for observations. And so really what we were asking them was questions around how they felt about the area, what their connection was to the area, what was their history in the area, and then just establishing those types of conversations at the door. We also were able to, so it was door to door, it was face-to-face surveys, it was workshops, it was partnerships with local colleges, schools, youth groups, community groups, and just trying to kind of get as wide a sense of what the community felt about their community. And so we looked at a few different things, but the main things that were sticking out, just one little thing, we had a letterbox that we posted out 500 leaflets to the 500 homes in the area, and 150 were hand delivered back. So this was a community that was obviously invested in their area, and they were another way to engage with younger residents as well. So it was a kind of a little bit of a fun way to feed back into the process from the very start. But what became very clear was that despite the nature of the route as being very practical and very important route for 98% of the people in the area, 52% did not feel safe to use it in the evenings, or 52% reported that they would like to feel safer. So at this point we had we were looking at it rather. So we developed a thematic guide to guide the consultations for the next phase. So rather than going to designs right away, we wanted to look at thematic. And so for phase 2, we wanted to see how brainstorming could be done together. One of those moments.
Are we dancing?
Yeah. You can go on a little. So essentially, this is what our consultation looks like, and this is what our response to the questions that we had asked the community looks like. So rather than we ran a flagship Christmas event based on some of the observations from the community that they wanted some place to congregate, they wanted a market, they wanted different places for the children to play, they wanted more greenery, they wanted more lighting. And so the Christmas event seemed like a good time to run something like that. And it really gave everybody, ourselves, community, the council, a real sense in a 1-to-1 ratio, what the suggestion feel like when you walk through it. So whether that was the pinch points in the road, whether that was the lighting in the laneways, the use of greening, the involvement of children in the design of the space, the exhibition spaces of local histories, the walking play that was designed by students in the local college. It was all about trying to offer like an opportunity from us to say, this is what we've heard. Have we heard you? So that brought us on to the next one, which was then going about refining the ideas. So we've been listening to how people felt up to this point, but then we were now going to ask the council to respond to those suggestions. So the next phase, is still a consultation phase, was about how we put form to the feelings, if you like. And so maintenance rotas, litter collections, planting, drainage, play space, traffic calming, lighting plans, they were all the things that council, the different departments of the council were all saying, well, this is what we can do to respond to this in relation to that. We can't put this type of lighting in. You must put in this standardized lighting temperature, and you need to be careful around this wire here, and so on. And so all of those were then put into community workshops. So there were members of the community that couldn't come out to those things. So we ran different things around the bingo group and the teenager group to the local school as well. So rather than asking people to come out and get consulted, you know, that kind of like logic where you want to get people to consult them, it was about trying to meet them where they're at. And this was kind of one of the latest consultation meeting, which was also a summer pop-up, which enabled communities to feedback on the ideas, but it also meant that we could use it as an opportunity to consult ourselves. So it was another opportunity to consult on, are we hearing you in relation to what the council is now proposing as some of the ideas to where we're going? And so we were able to use temporary installations just on the day. We were able to do take up a section of one of the quads that we could then plant, and could then, again, just people will get a sense. So Robert, my owns that, oh sure, Jonathan, his nephew, was able to say, am I allowed to step on this area? And so now it was just one of those things that the Parks Department hadn't really thought about how they were going to prune the trees according to Jonathan, not according to the seasons. So it was also a really lovely opportunity to begin those prototyping, the bedding, the planting, playful intervention, biodiversity. And it was also about the opportunity of the community to run and start a tradition of street feasts and playful streets. And so we were able to do, I'm finishing now, we were able to introduce them to one of our other projects, which is Playful Streets. I'm sure you've heard there are different versions all over the world, but the idea was to make the occasion to encourage children back out to use the streets to play on. And it was really about turning streets into intergenerational community spaces. So in terms of where we're at now, is we're at the delivery phase where we're preparing the brief for the county council. And it's really about how we can ensure through in-house workshops in the council now that we can encourage cross-departmental designs or consideration on the community design brief. So it's the community that gives the design brief, not the council that prepares the design. And so that's the process. And so all of that will be available in an open source guide where any community can then use that, utilize all the tools, all the facilitation scripts, everything that we've prepared over the course of the last year and a half. They're all the things that you can sorry, I'm rushing now, but so that's basically it about building relationships and partnerships and all that good stuff, but it needs to be done with a real eye on the idea that things are delicate, and anybody who has a problem with the process needs to be listened to and talked with, and their concerns need to be observed. And so that's where we're at the moment with
Great.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Tom Cole. He's from the Active Travel Academy at the University of Westminster, and he'll be talking about what people really think about traffic reduction.
What do they really? Okay, starting my time. Hi everyone, yes, I'm from that London. I am the only person who gets the gig to Dublin, but you know, someone had to do it. I took the bait. So my colleague Rachel Aldred is the director of the Active Travel Academy at the University of Westminster. Its name probably describes it quite well. My colleague Lucy Farrow at Britain Thinks has just produced a child, so I think it's forgiven for not joining us. So first, for those who aren't familiar with the concept of a low traffic neighbourhood, a very brief primer. So the area bounded by the lines is a low traffic neighbourhood in my home borough of Islington in London, and the numbers denote filters, as they're called, points through which motorised vehicles are discouraged from travelling, either through a physical barrier, bollards, or maybe a camera which says if you go through here you're going to pay a fine. The idea is exceptionally simple. It's not new. We've been doing it for a very long time, but it was done in a very large way in the early stages of the pandemic. And it has to be said that the evidence is very clear that these things work. They do discourage through traffic in a big way, and the spaces within become much more attractive for walking, for cycling, for just hanging out. There is plenty to be said about all the other possible consequences, including what happens to the traffic on the so-called boundary roads, but that is not for today. Suffice to say that when these were done in a big way in the pandemic, it wasn't entirely without controversy. Here in West London, the borough of Ealing, certain local residents didn't like the introduction of a low traffic neighbourhood and demonstrated their feelings by upending the planters which were being used as an effective and very cheap physical barrier. So another thing to say about low traffic neighbourhoods, because they were done quickly, they were done quite cheaply, there was no prettification, it was simply the filters, and they were done generally without consultation, which, as I hardly need to tell you, can sometimes excite strong reactions. Here are some examples of what the press was saying. Top left, death threats. Bottom left, vigilante motorists. Well, that's a familiar concept. Top right, workmen starting exceptionally early to avoid a fight with locals. Bottom right, a march in my neighbourhood. Give us back our roads, or whatever it might be. And now we're back in Ealing, and as you can see, someone feels that this is an abuse of power. This was before the planters were upended. So, in summary, it's an intervention which is very effective but isn't universally popular. And for obvious reasons, we want to understand slightly better what's going on in terms of people's attitudes. So, this kind of thing started emerging fairly early in proceedings. This is a bit of market research done by a PR company. And the question that was posed was, to what extent, if at all, do you support or oppose the introduction of low traffic neighbourhoods in London? And by asking that question, they were able to report that there was any support for low traffic neighbourhoods in London. My contention is that that's not the right question. It's possibly a slightly deceitful question to ask. It's a bit like asking, wouldn't it be nice if we were all just kind of like nicer? Yeah? It doesn't require any commitment. It doesn't express the inevitable trade-offs that lie at the heart of any kind of intervention like this. And it's understandable because the people behind this kind of research were looking to have a positive story to tell. Now, I am a researcher, and whilst I may have certain preferences, I am committed to neutrality, and I'm interested in knowing the truth to the extent that we can get hold of it. I'm also interested in advancing my slides. So, we did an omnibus survey, as it's called. About 2,000 people, socially demographically representative of the wider society, and we asked questions like that one. So you've hopefully had a chance to get the gist of it. We are inviting people to say whether they'd be prepared to endure additional journey times on a car trip if there was some payoff. So people could say no delay, or they could specify a degree of delay that they'd be able to endure. So here is one of the 4 impact areas that we offer people. We offer them reduction in NO2, reduction in greenhouse gas, reduction in traffic, and increase in walking and cycling. So coming up from the bottom, NO2, I'd love to be able to take a poll of the room to see what your expectations are. Time marches on. Right. And what you find here is that 18% of people say no delay is acceptable. I don't care whether there's a 25% reduction in NO2. I'm not going to accept a delay. But by the sheer genius of mathematics, 82% of people will accept some delay. And if you look on the far right, some people will accept an arbitrarily large delay. Now that makes me slightly nervous about these results. And so I wouldn't suggest that what we've got here is the hard truth, but it is an interesting indication of where opinions might lie. And if we proceed, you see you've got a fairly similar picture for greenhouse gas, quite a similar picture for traffic, and it's only a little bit different where you talk about walking and cycling, and I suspect that's because people are thinking, well, look, the walkers and the cyclists are already enjoying the benefits. I'm not sure that I need to seek that particular outcome and pay a price in the process. Just to get under the skin of that a little bit, we're at nitrogen dioxide here, and forgive me if this slide isn't terribly easy to read, but here we're differentiating between people who have some experience of traffic restrictions in their area and people who don't. So we have 2 categories: traffic restrictions, other traffic measures, and then people with no experience. And you can see there is a bit of difference, but it's not dramatic in this diagram. So now we got a little bit under the surface, and we've played some tunes with the figures. By way of explanation, we did have to simplify things a little bit here, because those 4 or 5 categories of delay were difficult to work with. So we just turned it into a binary. Either I will accept some delay, or I won't accept any delay. And here, in each of these diagrams, the bigger the bar, the greater the resistance. That's the simplest way of putting it to you. And all of the charts I'm going to show you now are statistically significant. So having looked at a variety of socio-demographic factors, we find that some produce statistically significant results and others not. So here, perhaps no surprise that gender does come out as statistically significant. Males more resistant to delay than females. Just over 16% of males won't accept delay, and about 12% of females won't accept delay. And this is what we call the hard rejection of the intervention. So they're saying, I don't care whether it's nitrogen dioxide, greenhouse gas, walking and cycling, traffic? No. There will be no more delay. Here is an interesting one. This is about housing tenure, which was one of many characteristics that we had in the survey data. And if you're able to see the middle bar is the tallest one. So people who rent from the council are the ones who are most resistant to delay. Again, this is across all of the 4 impact areas. And I don't know whether this is anything we can read into, but renting from someone else, one of the 5 categories of tenure, is the group who are most amenable to having to put up with a bit of extra journey time. Back to something I showed you a moment ago, whether or not people have experience of traffic management in their area. And perhaps you wouldn't be too surprised that if you just split it into a simple, either you have had traffic management in your area, or if you've not, then the people who have no experience of it are more resistant to delay. Perhaps we would have expected that. Now, on this slide, this is the slightly softer version of objecting, where someone has said, for one at least of the 4 impact areas, I don't accept any further delay. Here, ethnicity, we get a difference. So people who are other than white are more resistant to delay than people who are white. Here, we have educational attainment. So people whose education finished at secondary school are more resistant to delay than people who did a bachelor's, and again, than people who did a higher degree. And this one, I suppose, again, isn't terribly surprising. The more urban the area in which you live, the more accepting you might be of having to travel for a little bit longer. And I suspect that the explanation might be that if you live in a hamlet or an isolated dwelling, it's hard to see the point. And frankly, we're not seeing many low traffic neighbourhoods being introduced into that kind of environment. Now, as in all of these things, it's statistics, right? So some things don't make the cut. Notable by its absence is car ownership. So you might think people who own cars are much likelier to be opposed to this kind of intervention than people who don't. Well, they're in the data, but it doesn't come out as statistically significant. Interesting. We had a couple that were very close. We had region. The Scots are okay, relatively speaking, with additional delay. Londoners, not so much. And surely that has quite a lot to do with the fact that we saw a great deal of this in London. It was all over the media. People were just that much more alive to it, I think. And again, we were quite close with social grade. So you might expect a similar kind of gradient. So the higher the social grade, the more accepting. And I suspect what we've got is a lot of covariance between tenure, social grade, education, and possibly even ethnicity. I think all of these things probably vary broadly together. Now, to close something a little bit different, changing the theme, we said to people, well, how should these decisions be made in future? Because, of course, this isn't just about the scheme and its implications. It's about how the whole thing was done, which during the pandemic wasn't perhaps an example of good practice, should we say. So we give them various options. And on the far left, we say, do you think local residents should work together with the local authority? Well, it turns out that people do think that. And the thing that they think is least likely to be the right answer is a referendum. And I find that very interesting. I mean, if I weren't a highly neutral academic, I would say I find it very encouraging. Because referendums have gone brilliantly in the UK. And I'm not thinking of anything in particular. But this kind of thing, which involves a dialogue, which involves the possibility of personal resident citizen sentiment and, dare I say it, expertise, seems to me to be the way forward for this kind of intervention. I'm done. Thank you very much for listening.
Quick question.
No. Sorry. Yeah, no. Speaker number 3, on the go.
That's what I was like.
Okay, we actually have 2. Sarah McDonough and Finola O'Driscoll both work for the NTA, the National Transport Authority here in Ireland. Sarah's a senior transport planner and Finola is senior project manager, and they both worked on the 2021 Walking and Cycling Index, which was an amazing survey, an enormous assessment of walking and cycling in Ireland and the UK. And here's Tocha.
Thanks. I heard from my Scottish colleagues yesterday, I've been saying the Walking and Cycling Index 2021 for a long time, and they just call it wacky. So stress wouldn't like that, I don't think. So yes, and I have to thank the previous speakers. If I had a chance to hear anyone, it would have been you two. So delighted to see those. What's the Walking and Cycling Index? It's an assessment of walking and cycling in towns and urban areas across the UK and Ireland. It's inspired by the Copenhagen Bicycle Report, which is kind of instrumental in keeping that city one of the most livable cities in the world in all the various city states and ranks. Because they're measuring what they value. So Strands wanted to get in on that action and developed what was called the Bike Life, and now reformed people, including walking. And Dublin got in 2019, but what was called Bike Life, and 2021. The Walking Cycling Index, and I'm pleased to say we're going to be doing the same similar survey in Cork, Waterford, Galway, and Limerick in upcoming years. We just Chris the Arms just wants to let us do that. This one is for the Dublin metropolitan area, which is quite vast, from Greystones to Donaghmore to Kilcock. And so what's in it? The big part of it is an independent representative survey of over 1,100 adults over 16, whether they walk or cycle. So this is door to door to create that large area. They used to call on a couple of thousand people, but they had to get every electoral district. They had to match the census and that's so demographically representative. And then we need to provide loads and loads of city data with footpaths, kilometres, cycle paths, numbers, pedestrian crossings, some of you might be in the room and help me gather all that stuff. Sarah. And then to put the flesh to the bones, we have some human stories of how walking and cycling impact lives. It is so strong. They are a walking and cycling charity. It's probably not as, I don't know where I'm in a room with an academic who probably could tear up their methodology, but they do try to be as independent as possible. And there's some questions in there that we try to figure out some trade-offs. But in terms of levels, last time I did it, I just kept talking. I did not give over control at all. So Sarah, that's why she's here. It's my turn. Levels of walking. So pretty good levels of walking. 64% of those in the metropolitan area residents walk at least 5 days a week. The UK average is 50, not that we're comparing, but something. And that's increased 3 percentage points in 2019. And a quarter of it's cycle, but we're not allowed to talk about that early. So walking was the only mode that increased since 2019. Now bear in mind this survey was done during the summer of 2021. There was still pandemic restrictions and stuff like that. But it's great to see that walking increased. But we've kind of all experienced that on a personal level. And right. Now, and what was great about this is because we were hearing all the conference, the government's chucking money at the NTA to spend at local authorities, and we need to get some good data behind the impact of what is happening already with walking and cycling and what's the potential. So every day, those who choose to walk where they have car available saves the emissions of 69 person tons, which is equivalent to nearly 1 million people take flights from Dublin to Heathrow. It takes 330,000 cars off the road. It prevents 547 early deaths, which, in monetary terms, is quite huge. And through quite a sophisticated modelling exercise, so starts up teams of statisticians, walking saves the net benefit to individuals and society. Annual benefit is 796 million. So we kind of need this high level stat. There's still street fights when we get there to but we need these high-level staff because they're very powerful, and when we release the report, they were the ones in the paper. And now it's Sarah.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual walking statistics within the Walking Cycling Index. So the results that we got back were that 95% of all residents walk, and of those people, about 64% walk at least 5 days a week, which is great. It's generally pretty evenly split across gender, ethnicity, and age, which is great. There's slight variations. So then there's also a proportion of the population that walk every day. So generally more women walk than men every day. But unfortunately, people with a disability are less likely to walk every day than people without a disability. And that could be down to things that we've heard in other presentations, like the lack of drop curbs, to make it harder for people in a wheelchair maybe to get around. People that are aged 60 to 25, the kind of younger demographics, are more likely to walk every day. That's probably due to the fact that a lot of them drive, and it's like their main mode to get around. And then finally, generally 50% of white people are more likely to walk every day versus 39% of people of ethnic minorities. Next, please. Thank you. So what do people walk for? Generally, the majority of people that responded are walking for to get to a destination. So they're either going to work or school or shopping. So that was 54% of people, but it was quite closely followed by people who are walking for leisure, so for enjoyment and fitness, and they're around 40%. And then of the school children that were surveyed, there was about 60% who are walking for school. So as part of the Walking Cycling Index, we also looked at what would help people walk more. So generally people said that if things were closer to them, they would walk more. So they said that if there was more shops nearby, they would walk more. If there was more green areas, they would walk more. And just more things that are close to home, they would walk more. So that's kind of common sense. If something's a narrow walk away, we're probably not going to be walking that often. But there was other things that people reported would also help them walk more. So these were wider pavements, there were more frequent crossings, nicer places to stop and rest, and better accessibility. And I think the interesting thing that we found here is that men and women tended to have the same preferences for what they wanted to see more of, but women more strongly rated things like drop curbs and seeing fewer cars parked on the pavement and having places to stop and rest. And this is probably typically because women, and I don't want to generalise, are usually the people with children who are pushing the pram and need to get around easier than possibly men do. So that was what we found in the results. And then looking at what people want. So while we did look at, who walks, why they walk, we also looked at other items that people want in the future. So one thing that came up was people are looking for the creation of more 20-minute neighbourhoods. So 84% of people were in favour of that. And for those that aren't familiar with 20-minute neighbourhood, it basically means that the majority of the services that you need will be within 20-minute walk of your home. So doctor, shops, and your school. So you won't have a need to go beyond your neighbourhood as often. So finally, we also had a look at some neighbourhood data within the Walking and Cycling Index. So all residents should feel welcome in their neighbourhood. And generally people do feel welcome, but the issue that the report threw up is that people do feel that their streets are generally dominated by motor vehicles. So by people parking on the path and speeding and it being difficult to cross the road, those sort of things are things that people reported finding an issue in their area. So just to finish up, we also had some case studies within the Walking and Cycling Index, as Noah mentioned earlier. And these kind of serve to contextualise the data and bring it to life. So we had more than the two that I'm going to show you, but the others are all cycling, so I couldn't include them. But this is a study of, or a case study from a woman whose child goes to school in Harold's Cross. And they essentially said that when this school zone was installed, it was more difficult for the mother to drop the child to school because she could no longer just pull up outside and throw the child out. And she had to actually find a parking space and then walk to school. And she said that it was too much hassle. So in the end, she just started walking to school. So she was within walking distance anyway. So that, maybe there's some here, maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, so that's just kind of one example of how those bollards have made such a difference there in that case study. And then the last case study that I'm going to show you is just from the Blackrock Main Street. And so Blackrock is a village in South Dublin. And they had a very active business group who worked with the council to develop their main street and introduce new measures. And as part of the new measures, they made the street one way. They introduced more space for socialising, cycling, walking, and they've had great success with that. It's made their neighbourhood more livable, and we've had a lot of good feedback on that scheme. I think that's everything. Yeah, that's it. So thank you very much.
Mandy is our fourth speaker. You're I'm trying to get it around.
And stopwatch on so you don't.
Oh, okay, all right, great. She's a PhD candidate at the Dublin, working on sustainable transport, particularly in relation to equality, and talking about the social status of.
Right, so let's see how I do with the different thing. So a 2-year-old in Cincinnati in the US had always been fascinated with the rubbish truck that came to collect their waste. So when he got a gift of a toy rubbish truck, he thought life could not. I mean, it did. He got to meet the two men who drove this amazing machine. Now it's 7 years and counting, and that story still comes up on social media every now and then. Now, it reminds us of another reason why this is such a heartwarming story. It's about the innocence of a child who looks at those two men and sees heroes, because it doesn't last. We as parents don't aspire for our children to become rubbish collectors. We want them to be doctors, lawyers, engineers. Why? Well, over and above the fact that we know that those are better paying professions, we also instinctively understand that social status matters. It's not just about outcomes that are simply ego. It's outcomes that really matter in life. The neighborhoods that we live in, or avoid mentioning where from, the schools and universities we dream of getting ourselves or our kids into, the clothes we wear or avoid being seen in. Our motivation is at least at its foundation logical and understandable. We strive to associate ourselves with things that will cause others to think well of us. So the question that I asked as part of a larger study is, what about the way we get from A to B? Is there a social status association with various modes of transport? Because if there is, it's very likely that it affects our choices, and it could be an issue we need to consider to push for greener ways of getting around. So to investigate this question, I recruited 16 participants, spread evenly across age groups, and split exactly half and half between male and female. This is what I asked them and what they answered. First, I tested for occupation status association. I showed my respondents images such as this one. By the way, this is the exact same slide that I saw in the test. I asked them to assign each of the job titles in the list to someone they can see in the image, or someone they can't directly see but know is there, like people inside the bus, taxi, or car, but not in buildings. I said that they may recognize some of the locations, but to answer who they think would get around in what way if this were Dublin. Now, at the time, it was mid-pandemic, so I couldn't exactly go and take photos on location. 2 of the job titles given were generally considered high status, and 2 were considered low status per 2 different listings that I consulted. Now, the job titles were arranged in alphabetical order, so they didn't always cluster together as they did in the previous slides. So these are all the slides that they were shown. The transport choice most associated with high status occupations is by a wide margin private car use. Only 11% of high status occupations were thought to be among the pedestrians shown in the images. Sentiments related to public transport are significant to walking. Walking from the drop-off to your final destination is the most accessible choice when you disembark from your bus or your train. And speaking of trains, something strange happens with this image. The number of high-status occupations associated with public transport was higher in this image than any of the others. Now notice here that public transport is represented by it's either a tram or a train. I let my respondents decide what they thought it was. Most of them said train. So what happens if we remove just this image's results from the totals? Association of high-status occupations with pedestrians in the images goes up a little, from 11 to 17%, but that's in part because of the fall in associations with public transport, from 13 to 8%. Now, with all the images included, thank you. With all the images included, public transport users and pedestrians are most likely to be associated with low-status occupations. If you take the image with a train out, move the slide up, pedestrians are actually more associated with low-status occupations than public transport users, but it's close. The similarity in associations for drivers and cyclists was really interesting, and it can be explained by a fascinating cognitive dissonance, but that's a conversation for another conversation. So the next test was basically characteristics association. I showed my respondents images of people using various forms of transport with a list of 4 negative and 4 positive adjectives. They had to choose at least 2 to associate with a person who is the central focus on the image. So in this photo, for instance, the lady in blue using the scooter. These adjectives were ones I found to occur frequently in the media discourse analysis that I did earlier in the overall project. So these are the slides my respondents saw representing scooters, cars, bicycles, walking, and public transport. Pedestrians were actually quite positively regarded, though this was the case for all the road user groups, again, except for the public transport users. Now, there were 2 really interesting things that happened in this data. Firstly, those who chose negative adjectives for pedestrians all chose self-centered. When respondents elaborated, there seemed to be a common thread of how we all tend to just be focused on ourselves and our own thoughts when we're walking. The high number of negative adjectives associated with a bus passenger tended to focus on the impression that he was taking up 2 seats. Now, I have used this type of commuter bus a lot, and so did my testers, the people who tested my stuff before. None of us picked up on this. My own experience is that people often put bags on an adjacent seat, or we spread ourselves out a bit, and we move. You move your bag or yourself if you're asked. So this impression was shared in an informal conversation with an acquaintance who at the time was a regular bus commuter. I couldn't find any relationship between respondents' own road user group identity and their adjective selection. The relationship lay in gender. 7 respondents remarked on the bus passengers' apparent use of 2 seats. 5 of those 7 were women. One of the 2 men in this group was elderly and therefore also in a group that is more vulnerable. If we consider the 2018 Plan International report that 6 in 10 women don't feel safe taking the bus, and more than a third of women have experienced physical harassment in public, this result starts to make sense. Walking up to this passenger and saying, "Excuse me, can I sit here?" carries much less risk for a man, especially a young man, than it does for a woman. Now, lastly, I told my respondents that the average annual salary in Ireland is €39,000. While the number is not really important as it was just an anchor, it is reasonably accurate. I then asked the respondent to tell me what they think is the annual income of a person who mainly uses this form of transport, This, of course, being the image on display. These are the slides my respondents saw. What I was mostly interested in was, I think they've already disappeared. What I was mostly interested in was the walking, driving, public transport, and cycling. For each respondent, I took the top amount guessed, and I made that 100%. Thank you. I then calculated what percent of the highest estimate each of the other estimates was and used that number to arrange them from lowest to highest. The chart there shows how many times the income estimate fell in the respondents' top, mid, and bottom ranges. Now, it looks good for pedestrians, doesn't it? I'm sorry, I'm about to let you down. Now we can see there's a significant difference in the income estimates between commuter bus users and inner city bus users. The high income estimate for the male pedestrian also obscured a generally low income estimate for the female pedestrian. Why this difference? Two things played a role here. Firstly, the clothing of the pedestrians. It never occurred to me when I selected the images. And unfortunately, my testers were equally obtuse when it came to these things. I mean, look at me. But one respondent remarked that the shoes were cheap. I'd never have guessed. Now, this may or may not have been an issue for the other respondents, but what was most certainly a factor, and this was fascinating, was that the male pedestrian was thought to be a businessman because of his clothes. This is not a fair conclusion to make because a considerable number of lower status jobs, such as waiters or salesmen in some shops, are required to wear suits. The stronger influence here, though, was the reasoning that only someone who is wealthy can afford to be walking in Dublin City because they're rich enough to afford a home within walking distance of the city centre. We cannot rule out gender in respondents' income estimates, but certainly the reasoning offered where respondents elaborated was fascinating. Now, I have 50 seconds left, so I can do my conclusion slide. This was a very small cog in a larger study, and my findings in other related exercises were consistent with these results being reliable, but for this specific part, we're talking about 16 respondents. So my conclusions are subject to replication with a larger sample. However, based on my overall findings, I can say with confidence that as active travel advocates, we need to understand that when we ask people to walk, take public transport, ride bicycles, we're asking them to go against their instinct to associate with things that communicate high social status to those around them. I don't have the answers here, but from my experience, both as active traveller and researcher, I would suggest that we need to consider what we're offering. If we treat pedestrians and public transport users like second-class citizens, that's how they will be seen. And people would need very strong alternative motives to choose to be second-class citizens. Think of it this way. Which of the road user spaces in this image is the equivalent of a nice overcoat from a respectable high street shop? And which is a ratty old throwaway found in a bin? Which would you like to be seen? Thanks.
Here is Sandra Baker. She's from the Institute for Transport Studies. She's a senior scientist there in Vienna and advisor to the Austrian Health Fund and a member of the working group on intersectoral cooperation between transport and health. And she's interested in how we make active accessibility.
Yeah, good afternoon. It seems that I'm the only speaker in this session who's not from the UK or from Ireland, so I hope you excuse this. And I'm happy that you're still here. So the title of my presentation is From Niche to Norm, Make Active Mobility the Norm, and I hope it fits perfectly to the theme of the session. Insights into how we think about walking. Well, it's not only about walking, but it's especially trying to understand people's choices and behavior. And it's about social transformation and social norms in the context of mobility. Actually, this presentation originates from a national project, which I'm working together with 4 colleagues from Walk21, and it's still ongoing last year and this year, and I'm going to present you some methods and results of this project. Well, the overall objective of this project was to providing a comprehensive understanding of the factors influencing urban mobility behavior. Our research question were which factors influence transport mode choice in 3 case-study cities. We have selected 3 cities in Austria, which are quite near our biggest city, Vienna. We wanted to know which urban profiles can be identified and which socio-demographic characteristics circumscribe these urban mobility profiles. And finally, we would like to analyze or explain which measures can be tailored to address those profiles identified. So when you see there is one predominant phrase, it's mobility profiles, and I'm going to explain this during my presentation. But first I want to give you a very brief insight into our workflow. We have work package 1 with the project management, then we have work package 2 and 3, where we have done our empirical work, addressing the objective of identifying those influencing factors, and in work package 4, we address the transformation strategies. This is the part in which we are discussing our results with decision makers and stakeholders. Well, this is the difficult part of the project. It's easy to analyze data, but you have to present it to the stakeholders, and you can see how this works and how you can talk to them. So we try to build a bridge between science and practice to build the scientific evidence. So some words about our methods and case study cities. As I've already said, we've chosen 3 rather small communities right in the surroundings of Vienna. We have combined with about 13,000 inhabitants. The Stockerau, it's a little bit bigger, and then Fisherman only has 5,000 inhabitants. So the core of our project is a study called Q-SORT, or Q methodology. Does anybody of you have worked with it or know what it's about? So I will slightly explain. It's about this picture here on the right side. It originates in psychology. It enables a systematic study of subjectivity. So it's about uncovering perceptions, attitudes, and viewpoints and motivations. And in the context of sustainable mobility, there are only a few studies dealing with this kind of methodology, and so it's quite new and interesting approach in our topic. So it's quite difficult to understand or to explain. I try to make it as easy as possible. Maybe we have time afterwards to talk about it. So we defined 40 statements, all out of the topic from mobility. It's about perceptions, how you perceive mobility. You have, for example, in my everyday mobility, saving time is a top priority, or it's important to me to minimize my impact of climate change. And we've sorted out 40 of these statements from literature and made this Q-SORT. And then we had interviews with participants, and the participants had to sort these statements according to agreement or disagreement. You see this here. They got these cards and they have to place it. This resulted in a quasi-normal distribution. And then it was statistically analyzed in a factor analysis. And the outcome of this were these mobility profiles I'm going to show you afterwards. Then what else we did? We did a survey. In these three case studies, we asked about mobility behavior, social demographics, and also about the statements, and at the end tried to mix these up to the Q-sort method and the results from the questionnaires. And the final step, as I've already said, we brought these results to the stakeholders and the local authorities in these three communities, discussed the results with them, and tried to figure out which measures best address those mobility profiles. So, hope you get it. So, what we have done so far, we've finished this work package 2 with this Q-sort. We had 39 interviews. Then we did this statistical analysis and identified those 5 profiles. And we have done this survey with a data set of 630 filled out questionnaires. So here comes the more interesting part, the mobility profiles we have identified out of this Q-sort. Well, you see this goes beyond the usual definition of car drivers, cyclists, pedestrians, and public transport users. So what we did is we had this psychological approach, and we figured out those 3 mobility types. The profile 1 is healthy and aware. People in the profile 2 are driven and pragmatic. Then we have flexible and reflected. Type 4 is safe and deliberate, conscious. And then we have the type which is efficient and self-determined. So I have prepared all those 5 profiles, but not to run out of time, I just want to pick out 2 exemplarily. And this is profile 1, which is healthy and aware. And all these statements or all this started with a sentence when I'm on my way in my city, and then I have to sort those statements. And what comes out for this profile is that I would like to do something for my health. It's very important for this persons. Then I enjoy being able to cover my distances in beautiful surroundings. I also want to feel joy to the way I move. So you see I hope you can see the bars, and these represent the agreements to this statement. And so yes, people sharing this viewpoint regard their daily mobility more than just going from A to B. They want to have beneficial concerning their health. They enjoy pleasant surroundings when they are on a walk or when they are on the move. And they are feeling a responsibility to minimize their impact on climate and the environment. So this characterizes this profile. The second one I want to show you is a purpose-driven and pragmatic type. Compared to the first profile, people are sharing this viewpoint regard mobility as a means to an end. So they use it to come from A to B. There is no emotional concern about it, and they want just to be in time. They usually choose the same mode. They don't want to think how to reach the destination, so yeah, they usually choose the same. And the profile is less or no responsibility for their environment and for ecological consequences. So I will move on. Yeah, okay, that's fine because I will skip through the other profiles. And I want to show you the distribution of the mobility profiles which we have found in the three communities. And especially the profile 1, 2, and 4, mostly represented in the cities, with slight differences across them. I doesn't want to go further into these details. So that is the example of Neuberg showing the ranking of the attitudes. That was the result in each cities about attitudes and motivation. So you can see the different colors. The yellow bars stand for internal drivers, the pink for social drivers, green for ecological drivers, and blue for functional purpose-oriented drivers. And you see the blue and the yellow bars dominate this scene. We also tried to bring together these mobility profiles with the results from our survey. This is work in progress because the project is still ongoing. But what we see is, for example, that the people in profile 1 are higher educated, they are financially well situated, they daily walk, they rarely travel by car. And the opposite, we have, for example, profile 2, the purpose-driven and pragmatic type, which is financially constrained. They have a high share of car ownership. They rarely walk or rarely cycle, and they buy car. So our next steps are the workshops in the cities, in those 3 cities, where we'll presenting our results and discussing this with the stakeholders, with the local authorities, with representatives from administration. Try to develop strategies together with them to promote the transition to mobility, to sustainable mobility systems. And we try to see how or which measures can address these specific mobility groups. So that brings me to an end. The take-home message is we identified various profiles and perspectives, which are composed of several socio-psychological variables. As you all know, there are different wishes, expectations, and needs behind mobility, and it's just more than the purpose of traveling behind all the most walking, cycling, car driving. There's always thing behind this. And, well, inclusive policy is needed to cover as many perspectives and need to have a satisfactory planning. So, thank you very much for your attention. This is our project team, Michael, Elizabeth, Patrick, Michael, and myself. Thank you.
I'm doing it in a second language. Well done. Can I ask the others to come on up and sit in front of this room, please? Aaron, Tom, Nola, Sarah, Megan. And as a way of apology, if you want to start first. Go first.
Well, Sarah, I had a question. I don't know if you know on the bicycle index. So you showed a graph there that showed the reasons people cycle.
Yes.
As in
walking and cycling.
Or sorry, walk.
Yeah.
Yeah. The question I had, of course, is that some people would walk for all 3 reasons. So how is that different? Because obviously, if somebody walks for recreation, they're probably likely to walk like that and maybe even walk to work. So we could do all 3, but it doesn't actually. How's that taken into account in that measure? You know.
You have to look at the the way the question is structured.
Yeah.
Probably was
You don't
the
walk
main
for,
reason.
most people don't walk for one reason only. They walk
Yeah.
for maybe all three reasons. So, because I'm interested in it from the point of view that people who walk for recreation are probably more likely to walk for other reasons as well than people who don't walk at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. The same applies to cycling.
So it would all be there on the website, Walking Cycling Index, and you can see the methodology and the questionnaire answers.
Is that the
It's on the NTA website.
website?
Yeah, just Google Walking Cycling. You have to see how the question was asked.
Yeah.
It did add up to 100, didn't it? So it's, yeah.
Well, and maybe which is the most reason you walk.
Maybe something like that.
Thank you. Who'd like to go next? Yeah.
Thank you all so much. Actually, I don't know if I've been in any session yet, but I've been so inspired by everyone. So thank you so much. It's really great. So it's really hard to pick a question, but given, I suppose, maybe the theme, I wanted to ask the National Transport Authority, to congratulate first of all on actually bringing walking in, to the index. And it's great to see that change, this year in our 21 survey. Could I ask, has it made an influence yet, really to say, on the organisation as the National Transport Authority and how walking is viewed as a mode of transport?
Well, firstly, probably congratulations is reflected back on pedestrian advocates because it was a decision that came from 17 cities or 18 cities in who applied it, and so yes, so they asked for it to be included. I'm not sure that came from you guys. Has it made a difference? Well, we've been very focused on active travel, probably more so now we're national than we're doing with all the local authorities, because it's easier to do pedestrian routes than it is to do cycle tracks. They're less contentious, and often there's quite a bit of, there's a lot of schools in Ireland with footpaths, there's a lot of towns in Ireland with no crossings, there's quite a bit of backfilling to do. So a good portion of our spend is actually on pedestrian facilities. We're very pleased with that. There's hardly ever a footpath that isn't a good spend. So it's in urban areas.
Go down the back.
My question is for Sandra, it's here from Austria. Yeah, well, thanks everyone for the presentation. My specific question to you, Sandra, is about the profiles. If I understood correctly, they were based on sort of psychosocial type of variables. And I'm wondering if to get a more accurate sort of a sense of how attitudes are represented in different variables that come from profiles, maybe variables of other kind, for example, more of socioeconomic order would have been maybe necessary to capture the influence of attitude in a profile.
Yeah.
Yes.
It was a little bit difficult because the participants we have chosen for this interviews, they were not representative over the population, but we try to make it balanced about men, women, and age. However, there was a high share of academics and higher educated persons. That might be the problem for this method. Maybe we get the opportunity to repeat it with a more representative sample. But I think that what Tom also said about this education thing, that the people who are have a higher education, they walk more, they cycle more than the poorer, and that's what we see when we match the profiles with the socio-demographic characteristics. It was a slide I showed in class. We have to take a look at this, how these come together.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. And I guess my question is probably mainly for the ATA folks and for Nadia as well, but it's just, I guess, looking at the push-pull factors of active travel as well and captured in the survey and walking and cycling. And I remember seeing a statistic that showed that, like, young people in Ireland,
out of all of countries in Europe, drive the least. And that initially is a statistic that makes you think that like we're really making progress and that we're kind of, young people are kind of setting much better habits. And then, but I think what amasses is actually that our insurance costs are so high in Ireland compared to every other European country that young people in Ireland cannot afford to drive, and so they're they're walking, cycling, public transport because it's just so much cheaper by compared to driving. And in every other European country, driving is much more financially accessible. But what isn't, so that data isn't capturing, I guess, how many people would choose to drive if driving was more accessible. We're looking at how many people might choose to walk. Walking is more accessible. But as is, I think Navi's research shows, a lot of people still kind of associate driving as aspirational. And so there's a sort of, and I think there's a class phenomenon at play there as well, where there's middle class people maybe are more comfortable with cycling as a lifestyle choice, for example, or walking as a lifestyle choice in a way that working class people may kind of want to move away from because it's a necessity, and to demonstrate that you're sort of able to do otherwise is part of what you're trying to demonstrate. And I think, in a way, I think it's a pity that there was maybe like a global south perspective on this conversation as well, because I think there's very different phenomena at play there in as far as, active travel being what the vast majority of people do across the global south. They just don't call it active travel most of the time, but because it's sort of the obvious, cheap, available way of getting around. But that whole aspirational idea about what people actually want to do or choosing to do versus what they have to do, and that I think there's just your kind of whether we can better capture what behaviour is the positive behaviours we actually want to see. What of them are coming about by push factors, what of them are coming about by pull factors, and the pros and cons of that.
Want to start, Navi?
So what I think I can say that is relevant to that, I am dealing with how people's heads working, so I don't have the kind of insight in terms of in practice what happens. What I can tell you I saw in literature review and also in the whole project that I've done is that there's this fascinating, I suppose you call it a cognitive dissonance that happens. Now my specialism is actually cycling. But it's so closely related to walking as well. If you ask people what do they think about cycling, is it a good thing? It's like, oh yes, very good, fantastic. The moment you ask them what do you think about cyclists, the sentiment and what I think it is from in my literature review discussion and also then seeing reflections of that in the rest of my study, is that when we think of cycling sort of from a distance, it's a good thing. Climate change, global heating, oh my God, cycling is awesome. But when we think of it in practice in our daily life, where I am in my car and I come across a cyclist, then there's this very negative of cyclists. And there's two issues that relate to the socio-economic sort of view I'm talking about cyclists now. I always think there is that relationship, like I said, with that businessman. It is, this person is rich enough to walk. And yet then there was also that association with, really low income guests for the female pedestrian. There's this contrast also between people thinking that people who cycle specifically are in a lower socioeconomic class, but then they also have this view of people who cycle as rich toffs, who just think they own the road. And again, I acknowledge that that's cycling. People can think very differently about pedestrians, especially because we do all walk. But I do think that there is a bit of that we need to consider in the walking context as well. That is all I can say from my perspective, but it's very kind of higher level and not to do with a practical day-to-day. What is it that motivated you to walk today? Or what is it that motivated you to choose against walking and take your car and sleep?
We don't do much research into driving. So I don't know. Maybe Tom knows a bit more around the kind of younger generations, is it still as that simple, or is it moving somewhat to mobility as a service, or anything so? Definitely, as Nadia was saying, in the index, it was a lower people with the lower socioeconomic groups felt the excitement wasn't likely for people like me. That didn't come across as for walking. Probably all I have to tell you.
Only anecdote, which is to say there may be solid research that I don't know out there, but the anecdote is young people today are more interested in owning the newest mobile phone than driving or owning a car. But I think when I say anecdote, I'm not convinced by that. And I think there's probably a lot that varies by where people live. I think that the need or the perceived need to own and use a car remains in a rural area.
Yeah. I overheard a conversation the other day where two people more my age were talking about their kids. The one's kid was now doing their driving license. Oh, it's such a rite of passage into adulthood, isn't it? And I can say that I didn't talk much about scooting there, which I also see as very kind of related to walking, if it's a kick scooter, not an electric one. And there, the impression was it's a child's toy. That it's one of the reasons I didn't include it, because that impression of this is not a form of transport skewed. The income cases were like 0. So I think we deal also with that view of mature into driving a car. It could be possible that affects people's choices. It's like that's a symbol of I've grown up on this writer's passage.
I'd be interested to see what people feel about cyclists in countries like Denmark and the Netherlands compared to here, like as a walker and a cyclist and a car driver and a public transport user. I think cyclists are so often kind of deemed to be the troublemakers on the road, but it's actually the roads that are causing the problem rather than the cyclists. But in maybe countries like the Netherlands or Denmark, I know it's a bit off topic, the cycling infrastructure is probably so much better, so cyclists aren't kind of deemed to be the problem so much.
So something very interesting I observed when I was last in Amsterdam. I didn't see it so much when I was in the Netherlands last. It struck me because now I remember that my fascination is with the social hierarchy on roads. And walking through Amsterdam, it struck me how pedestrians are at the bottom of the hierarchy there. Because there was so much invasion of pedestrian space in terms of bicycle parking. People are very good there to not cycle on footpaths. But my impression, and again, as Tom had to, this is anecdotal, but observing from having been immersed in the work that I was doing at the time, I looked at this visual message. And I was just like, wow, that's interesting that pedestrians are here really at the bottom of the hierarchy in terms of that their spaces are not respected. And it's that cluttered image, like that last photo that I showed you, like this vision of here's my path and there's clutter everywhere. And here's the next path and it is open and clear and unobstructed and good quality service and so on. That was an interesting observation from there, which might be an interesting perspective on your question.
Is there some over here? Let's go. Am I right? Go first. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you, all of you. I find that absolutely fascinating. I just really sort of interested from the kind of behavioural change point and where you go to next. So, like Nadia talking about the sort of social hierarchy is absolutely fascinating. And Sandra, then you were talking, you looked at kind of mobility segmentation in terms of groups, and I'm wondering, and then actually, Aaron, is it? You were talking about, like, in a way, you're just sort of putting all of that aside because you're just going into a group of people, a community, and asking them what do you want. But looking at the kind of segmentation piece, so we're learning all of this, and there's different groups and sort of social hierarchy. What do you recommend we then do with that in terms of starting a conversation with local communities? How does that affect how we engage with community, our messaging?
what are we trying to say? We have to sort of segment our messaging with different messages for the different groups, particularly Sandra, in terms of people identified their 5 different groups. What do we do with that? That's what I'm really asking.
So, well, what we're doing with this messages to go to the local authorities. We talk to the mayor and to the representatives of the administration. And we had already one workshop, and we have another one in autumn. And it's kind of difficult to talk to them. Some of them are really engaging and creative in their way of thinking of measures. And then there are others who are there was the example when we proposed the school streets. So the person said there are a lot of parents who bring their kids to school, and there are a lot of cars and this problem. And then because but you have the possibility to close the street. And then the answer was we can't do this because the parents will give me a call, and and that's the dissonance of this how to treat. But on the other hand, there is the will to do something, and that's what my experience is from this project.
Yeah, it's really interesting. One can think you get kind of clusters of some of those different segments in different areas. And maybe, for example, if it's a school, if you've got a cluster of personal health and awareness or something, a cluster that they're going to be an easier community to work with, perhaps, than one of the kind of official ones because they just want to get from A to B and they're not thinking about those. You have to have a kind of different kind of conversation with them to engage.
Can I ask Aaron, as part of that, I guess, do you find in the work that you've done that you have to find ways to address social status within a neighbourhood? Is it something you have to, or has it ever been something that come up as an issue?
Because the way in which we've spoken with people is on their doorstep, or it's sharing a meal, or it's out playing with children and other people, teaching those children against they used to play. That obviously is there, but it often gets diffused, and so the dynamic is very different a lot of the time. It's not just a kind of a public hall thing where you're asking questions, you're talking through, and you're trying to capture feedback in all sorts of different ways in terms of just mapping and so it doesn't come up, although where we're working is traditionally considered to be would have a lower socioeconomic background, and there is a large amount of people that are unemployed in the area, and it's an area that it's getting more and more mixed in terms of background, but not in our experience. Like our experience is we purposefully go out to share meals with people, to play together, to do that, so we avoid that type of literally like what do you think about like pinch points on the road, and all of a sudden you're going to have hell on earth. So you try not to take it from that point. You're sitting there eating a burger with someone, and then you're looking at the cones and you're asking, what do you think about that for travel through your local area? And so it's just a very different way in terms of talking with people than I'd be used to getting consulted with as a resident in the area myself. So we don't really have that experience. We try to humanize it. We just try to make everything kind of. Sorry, this doesn't sound very serious, but we try to make everything sound and just bring the best out of people, so that when we do have discussion around these kind of really needling points that as soon as they go on social media can all erupt. But like, you try not to talk about it like that. You just try to be nice, and then go from there, and just treat people as the residents in a local area. They're not drivers, they're not cyclists, they live there, and it's really important to them. So like, if the pinch point is going to affect the drain 10 doors down, then it's a big problem. And so you just, because they can see it in real time, can point it out. So, no, we haven't really. Yeah.
Lads, we have to stop. I'm so sorry. I invite you to pin our speakers afterwards if you have more questions. I know it's in the hand. Sorry. We're going to stop. Thank you very much. I say thank you for the